think we lose track of history over time through generations because, from family to family or generation to generation, stories aren't retold like they used to be. So I think it's important to let people know how it was 100 years ago. And it wasn't all that much different than it is today in one way. Well, water still flows downhill, right? You still have to pump water uphill. So there's some basics in life that just don't change. Irrigation is important as far as for food and providing food, and that never changes. But people are losing track of how food is produced and how food gets to the table, and that history needs to be told.
As the sun rises over the San Joaquin Valley, the breadbasket of the world, another growing season begins anew. Full of possibility.
The acreage that's grown here in Banta-Carbona Irrigation District is some of the greatest soil in the valley. It's something that you want to make sure is preserved. And all of that's made possible, really, the one thing that you don't think of is the delivery of water.
We couldn't survive with no farmers around. And we can't survive if we don't have water in order for supplying the farmers. So that's very simple. Very simple. No farmers, no life. No water, no life.
To truly appreciate that basic truth, remember a time before irrigation. For all this stretch of land has, rich soil and the ideal climate for a vast variety of crops, the one thing lacking is rain. The early dryland farmers must have done a lot of praying because everything depended on Mother Nature.
It was actually before there was any crop insurance or anything, so you either had a good year or you had a terrible year, depending on the rain.
This whole area was dryland farming, which depended on rainfall for their crops, which were cereal crops, barley, wheat, oats, those kinds of crops. They only farmed during the winter. They plant the crop in October, November, crops grew, they harvested them in May and June. Season over.
Who I started farming with was one of the early, not a founder of Banta-Carbona, but he was on the board very early. I asked him how a lot of farmers from this area had houses over in Santa Cruz and at the beach. And I asked him, how did everybody end up with beach houses? He said, well, before the irrigation district was dry land, there was nothing to do all summer, so we'd go to the beach. So, I don't know why they built the irrigation district.
My family settled here in the late 1800s, the 1860s, I believe it was, and homesteaded here, and I'm a third-generation farmer. I'm also a third-generation board member. There's a photo of my grandfather there in front of me as a chairman of the district. There are a lot of instances like that of long-time family farming.
The founding of Banta-Carbona Irrigation District is a story of families who wanted something better, a story of determination and sacrifice, and risk. The original landowners put up their own properties to borrow the money to build pump stations and canals. Not everyone believed it would pay off.
Well, the district was formed through an interest in landowners in the neighborhood, right? They were all dryland farmers, and they became interested in irrigation to diversify what they grew and what they could provide to the community. We're named Banta-Carbona. We originally, when the district was formed, we were 17,000 plus acres. About 2 years in, when this debt and the size of the project was becoming aware to the board of directors, well, one particular family that had a lot of land down around Banta decided that was too much debt and it wasn't feasible, and so they dropped out. So it always seems strange because our boundaries don't encompass Banta, but I think that's why the district formed when they were going to be in.
Construction went through a series of fits and starts. The first bond measure failed. The district hired one engineer, then another. 5 years after its formation in March of 1921, Banta-Carbona finally delivered water, not before voters approved a series of bonds worth nearly $20 million in today's dollars.
I'm in finance now. I work with money, and what awes me about it is the amount of money that had to go into building that system and that infrastructure and putting all of that into place at that time. It wasn't an easy thing. And to have the foresight that they did to get it from here to there and plan all of it, it's really mind-blowing to me that they had the ability to do that.
The new engineer designed it in less than a year, and then they built it in like less than 2 years, maybe even only a year and a half from day one to construction. So they hustled, and they threw a lot of manpower at it, evidently, and a lot of back-breaking work. Well, the main lift canal is about 5 miles long from the river up to the uppermost delivery point. And that was all concrete lined from the very beginning. They built 6 pump stations, and they lined 5 miles of canal. They made a cut all the way up the hill in that same time, all in that year and a half. So evidently they had a lot of people working on this. Maybe the pictures that are in our boardroom don't even give it justice to how many were working and how many were working simultaneously. Because in order to deliver water in 1926, they had to have laterals constructed also. I can't even imagine how many crews they had going.
Once water began flowing, Tracy was never the same. This old rail town was now surrounded by irrigated farmland, and agriculture quickly took center stage. Banta-Carbona was the last of 4 local irrigation districts to form.
It changed it dramatically. I mean, the growing practices in the area at the time were, dry land farming. You hoped for rain, and if it rained, great. If it didn't, then, better luck next year. And that all changed when they put the main lift canal in and were able to deliver irrigation water from the river up to the 14,000 acres that it serves today.
Farmers began planting dry beans and alfalfa. The first dairy farms began to pop up, an industry that thrives to this day. Gone were the days of praying for rain. Now, crops typically grown on the coast could thrive here too. That lucrative possibility helped an entire ag economy grow.
Now, with this kind of agriculture, you got crops being planted at different times and with using different equipment for different crops. So there was a lot of diversity in equipment, in support, and supplies. You had more people moving here, right, to work. And so then you had more people in town to feed and more people that needed services. So it's just one thing after the other as far as expansion.
Never before has it been so important to the world. And throughout our great country, it is the farmers who raise the necessary food for our millions of people.
Over 100 years, crops have come and gone and come back around, while others have left for good.
30 years ago, we used to grow a lot of peas, green beans and broccoli, cauliflower, and all that stuff. But the processors went to Mexico because of the labor. They can't compete here. So we lost all those markets. Sugar beets, those all went away.
Now we're in an era here in the last 10 years, everything's going to tree crops. Almonds, walnuts, pistachios, now cherries are making a comeback. We're like 2/3 trees now, whereas before, for decades, we were like 2/3 row crop, open field, 1/3 tree crops.
There's nothing easy about farming, nothing simple either. It's a labor of love passed down through generations and generations.
I can't imagine doing any other. It's an addiction. You love it, and you have to love it to do it well and stay in business.
Working with my dad and being able to spend time with him and work alongside him makes it all worth it.
Melons, all cantaloupe, honeydew, watermelon, cherries, apricots, sweet corn.
Tomatoes.
Yeah, you just hope some of those hit, because you know some of them are going to miss.
So I'm third generation and my kids are fourth generation. So we're probably close to 75 or 80 years in this Banta-Carbona Irrigation District. Yeah, mostly tears. A lot of blood and sweat too.
It's really cool to be able to work in a field that our family, previous generations have worked in. Our great-grandfather started a farm that then my father farmed in, and then Logan and I had the opportunity to join the company, join the business, and I think that's really lucky.
It's that dream of having your children, take over in the future and keep it rolling, but it's challenging to keep that dream alive now.
Farming lifestyle? Hey, you're out in the fresh air. I mean, like today and yesterday, the weather's beautiful. It's great out there, right? As far as the farming, though, it's a pretty hard life. Especially if you're the owner. Only because you're putting up, in some cases, your whole life savings in a year. And if it's a crop failure, you're mortgaging the farm to survive again in future years. It's a really Texas Hold'em all-in proposition.
There's been a lot of change in the evolution of farming in the Tracy area. We are growing more, we're getting more yields with less water and less chemicals. And we're being able to produce more food.
Farmers get a bad rap, but if you look at it, if you look at the details, we're using drip irrigation, the most efficient way of irrigating the farm. And we're growing food here. Food takes water, but we're doing it the most efficient way possible. We're saving as much as we can. We're doing our part. We're spending more money to make our farms more efficient so that we're not just, throwing water away.
You step outside of the industry and people think of farming and farmers as just a very simple, wearing overalls and chewing on straw, but it's really a complex, large, vertically integrated system that it's really extraordinary. Yeah, I mean, how far back do you want to go? I mean, you start at planning for the season, right? And so you have 20 acres of ground and you want to grow watermelons. You have to figure out when your harvest window is going to be, and that's coordinated with the producer that you grow for that's typically going to sell it for you. And so you do the math and say, hey, I need to plant on this day to make this time window, and then it rains. And then you have to shovel around and figure something out, right?
And if the water's not there, even for a day or two during the summer, and there's a day or two or three, it's critical because that could be the time when certain crops needed that water that week to provide their utmost production. So it's imperative that water's there every day for service.
When they built the water system back in the day, they built it to last. Much of it is still in use.
I think they were just as smart in that day as we are today. We do them injustice whenever we think we need to reinvent what they did or correct what they did because we're probably wrong. I mean, we're using the same pumps today as we were in the 1920s. They still do just as well. We just keep rebuilding them to the specs.
There are always improvements being made, of course, from rebuilding pump stations to relining concrete canals to conserve water. The district finally bought its first computer in the early 90s. Talk about change going from handwritten records to the digital age. Look back through the years, and it becomes clear Banta-Carbona is the kind of place where people tend to stay a while, where there's always been a simple, shared goal. Make sure the water's there.
We just come here with a dedication to do what we're supposed to do.
I can say I'm so grateful with Banta-Carbona because they opened the doors for me. So the only way for paying them back is to do my best. That's my philosophy. Giving and doing my best every single day. You know, when you live, you leave part of your life behind you. Banta-Carbona is awesome.
You watch them from startup to end and just babysitting them, and just amazing thing to do, watch them grow.
Coordinating with the harvest crews and the trucking companies and the marketing, and it all has to happen. It's fresh produce, so it can't just wait. When it's ready to harvest, it needs to be harvested, and you have to go. When it's go time, you have to go.
After all the careful planning and planting, irrigating and cultivating, the pivotal moment nears. The rush of harvest arrives in the dog days of summer, a race to get produce from the fields to store shelves, by machine and by hand, morning, noon, and night. Almonds shaken from trees with a cloud of dust. Melons plucked from fields, tossed into waiting arms and loaded into trucks. From walnuts, pistachios, and tomatoes. Even now, they're still growing the originals, dry beans, and alfalfa. The pace is grueling, the work purposeful. This is the kind of back-breaking work it takes to get food on your plate.
People need to know what they're eating, and you can't get any safer food than what we grow here in the United States. It's not as simple as just going to the grocery store and buying your food. A lot of challenges. And I think that's one thing that gets lost in our story.
We start harvest at nighttime, that way it's a little cooler, it's not so hot on the cruise. Each crew is going to get anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 boxes per crew. Right now we got 5 crews out here, so we're getting 15 to 25,000 boxes. Without California and the farming that's here, we wouldn't have enough food to supply the world. You need the food to live, and so to be able to say that I provide the food to feed America, I'm extremely proud to say that.
For Banta-Carbona, this is where water supply begins, the district's intake canal on the San Joaquin River. In the early 1990s, it also became the site of a pioneering project to protect fish and safeguard reliable water.
The fish screen, there is one out of practicality also, right? That was Jim McLeod, President Jim McLeod. He just passed away a few months ago.
I'd say he was a character. I would say that he was a tremendous asset to the district. I remember taking pictures for the family at his 50th anniversary of being on the board, and that was 6 or 8 years before I started. He was an encyclopedia of information about, what we did back in the day, why this is this way.
He knew what the lay of the land was and where things were going, right? Well, around 1990, up north on the Sacramento River, Glen-Colusa Irrigation District got shut down because of endangered salmon. This is the middle of the irrigation season, and they just shut them off, no water. And somehow they came to a resolution that so Glen-Colusa Irrigation District would build a fish screen facility, etc., for protection of salmon. Well, Jim McLeod saw this and he says, if we don't do something for our diversion, we're going to get shut off. And we can't afford to get shut off in July like they did. So we need to start getting together a fish screen facility. Around the board table, that was not a popular idea at all.
Well, Jim was a titan of local agriculture and a fixture on the Banta-Carbona board for 5+ decades. So he had a way of convincing folks, because the fish screen was eventually built. It was a major collaborative effort with federal and state partners for a facility that provides critical protection for endangered and threatened fish in the district service area.
The old one is up there.
We're happy that all of you came here to our...
I remember long before I'd started on the board, I think I was in high school at the time, and my dad was on the board, and they had finished the fish screen. And they were going to have the big grand opening for it. My dad said, "Get out of school, you're coming to this." Congressman Pombo was there, and the Assemblywoman was there, and all kinds of dignitaries from the Bureau of Reclamation, and everybody's there. And Jim is the MC.
We're very, very proud of what we did.
I didn't know anybody, I knew my dad. And so I sit down, and Jim starts talking, and he's a character.
You can have your fish, and we can have our water, and that works.
He starts talking about, this is the fish screen, and, it's $10 million, and this is what it does. It takes the fish, and, if they get sucked in, it filters them out and spits them out downstream. And he stopped and he said, "I don't know why we spent all of this money to build this fish screen just so they could go out in the river and get eaten by other fish." Which got a lot of laughs and a lot of raised eyebrows, but it was the one thing that I remember. He just had a quick wit, and he was never short of a sense of humor.
Declining native fish populations in the Delta are well documented. In this struggling ecosystem, where environmental, urban, and agricultural needs collide, Banta-Carbona is part of a groundbreaking study.
We're out here capturing predator fish, non-native fish that are living in the Delta. It's one of the data gaps that we've identified. So in 2017, Banta-Carbona Irrigation District, Patterson and West Stanislaus Irrigation Districts came to us and said, what can we do? How can we be a part of finding solutions to fisheries challenges in the Delta?
504.
Scientists are now focusing on an emerging piece of the puzzle, the role of non-native predator fish.
Largemouth.
We use an electrofishing boat that delivers an electrical current into the water that briefly stuns the fish, so we're able to net them and then put them into an on-board live well, and then we're able to process those fish. We're able to look at what species it is, we measure the fish, we pump its stomach to find out what it's eating.
And I think I was telling someone the other day that, if these were cattle and there was coyotes or wolves coming in and eating their cattle, they wouldn't give them more feed, they wouldn't give them more water, they'd take care of the predator that was wiping them out. And we think that's a big issue. If after 30, 40 years you still haven't brought these species back, maybe we should be looking in a different direction. And we found out that others were not willing to look in those directions, and one was predation.
93.
If we can go out there and we can do these studies to estimate the abundance of the predators, what they're eating, that would be a substantial contribution to the body of knowledge to manage the Delta ecosystem.
"100 years of Banta-Carbona Irrigation District." Today, California is a very different place. Our population is skyrocketed. Our snowpack is shrinking. In this era of climate change, perhaps it's fitting the century mark coincided with an extreme drought. There is more demand on water in this state than ever before. More strain on balancing the needs of cities, agriculture, and the environment.
Well, the big challenge is that, it has been going on for decades, right, is that the state of California, they continue to want to get control into a smaller and smaller group of hands to control water supply and where it goes and how it goes. And so that is the ongoing battle. It's been going on. It only gets harder every year.
Well, just in order to produce what we need to produce with less and less employees, less water, the rules and regulations, if things don't change, farmers will be out of business.
We're out here, we're feeding the world, We're growing food that people eat every day. And it is important to preserve this lifestyle, to preserve farms.
So, 100 years later, Banta-Carbona is still planning for the future, still securing its water supply after all these years, and now joining neighboring agencies to protect local groundwater, to preserve our way of life, to protect our food supply. So all of this can still make it to our dinner tables.
Everything's at stake. I think that, that's kind of the big pressure, if you will, that's on, I think, all of our shoulders, is making sure that we're spending this time that we have now planning for the future and doing what we can and looking forward, so that in 50 years or 100 years they can sit down and hopefully say that, those guys had the right idea.